Hi witches, thanks so much for joining me today. So today I really wanted to touch on the topic of pop culture witchcraft because I've been asked about it a couple times, not super frequently, but I've been asked about it enough that I wanted just to kind of like chat a little bit. So pop culture witchcraft, what is it? How do you do it, and what is going on? First, let's define what pop culture witchcraft is, which is actually harder than I thought it was going to be, but I've kind of settled on the definition of it is witchcraft that utilizes elements that are found in media, such as worshiping certain characters as deities, using incantations or other magical rules found inside books or movies or media of any kind, or following a series of rules set out in a fictional religion. A really good and notable example of pop culture witchcraft, or pop culture paganism really I would say, is the fact that there is a whole religion that is centered all around the Force, like from Star Wars, and people living their lives in alignment with like the ideals of the Jedi Order, right? So there is like actual evidence of that. There's like, this religion has seemingly a decent following, so I'm not gonna yuck anyone's yum, like do what you gotta do, of course. There are also pagans on the internet who I have seen worshiping deities from pantheons found in video games, books, you know, stuff like that. Being a Tolkien fan, I could definitely see how easy it would be to actually worship the Valar and the, you know, work with the Maiar as angels. So like I can absolutely see like if a world has been, you know, built well enough or evolved well enough where it is easy to some of these archetypes that we see not only reflected in mythology, but also in these epic games or movies or books or TV shows. So a really good example that I have from my own personal practice, when I was growing up, I watched this version of Robin Hood that depicted Herne the Hunter, or the Horned God. And for my entire practice, like since seeing that, that's kind of like the way I visualize him now. So I would definitely say that media and like pop culture, even though this is such a weird, obscure, like low budget BBC like TV show that I used to watch, or still watch, is actually still my favorite TV show, but it definitely influenced the way that I perceive my practice and the way that I interact with this deity. If you're approaching this from kind of a chaos magic perspective, which is definitely not my perspective necessarily, I really was deep into Wicca, then decided that like organized religion just wasn't for me, and now I consider myself kind of a non-denominational pagan and hedge witch. But if you're coming at this from maybe a chaos magician's perspective, which is a whole other kind of set of like rules and thoughts about the way that magic and energy flows in the universe, very, very cool stuff, definitely. But you might see not only a bigger prominence of pop culture witchcraft in amongst the circles of chaos magicians and stuff like that, but you might also be familiar with the term or the concept of an egregore. If you're not familiar with that term, I feel like I'm going to sum this up poorly, so please continue to do your research beyond this video, but essentially an egregore is a thought form entity, and the idea behind that is like if enough people believe that it's real, then it is. Now, a lot of people do slam pop culture paganism, saying it's kind of, you know, not real or not legitimate because there isn't a huge historical backing. To an extent, I kind of understand. The biggest example that I see of this is when Norse pagans and Norse practitioners express frustration over people thinking that Loki is kind of like the same figure that you see in the Marvel movies, because he just like isn't, if you're looking at the actual mythology. So I think if you are going to be practicing pop culture paganism, you either need to A, make it super clear that that is what you're doing, that you are working with that version of Loki, like, and that is your deity that you are specifically working with, and that you understand that the modern retellings of these deities in fiction, or, you know, I think another really good example is like people using Lore Olympus to describe the Greek gods, which definitely pisses off a lot of Hellenic pagans. And I totally understand the frustration there, because I would also be a little bit like miffed if I saw a deity, you know, that I worked with misrepresented in media and kind of seen as this figure that they're really not. Like, I get it. To that end, I would say I'm not discouraging you from practicing with a pop culture deity or creating one of your own from one of your favorite characters. Like, absolutely not. Your practice is your own. Do as you will. Also think it's super important, if you are kind of considering doing this journey into pop culture witchcraft or pop culture paganism, it's important to recognize that you might be drawn to these figures because of the archetypes that they might represent. So, you know, for example, okay, here's a good one. Here's a really good one. I don't know if anyone out there is super into Avatar: The Last Airbender, but like, same. And, you know, let's say that you are very much called to worship Yue, the girl who turns into the moon, right? So if that is what you would like to do, I am not going to tell you not to, and you have my full support. I love everyone's different practices. I love everyone's different ways of practicing and expressing themselves spiritually. But I would also maybe encourage you to learn about other lunar goddesses and see if there are any similar characteristics, and see if you still feel called to be worshiping this kind of fictional figure, or if you're called to another deity, because sometimes deities have this funny little way of reaching out to us through the media that we are surrounded by, and the things that we are exposed to. So for me, the whole reason that I kind of even got into witchcraft and paganism is because I saw Hearn on a TV show. Because of that, I figured out what paganism was, and then that kind of just snowballed from there, and now I teach it on the internet, which is cool. I also think it's important to say that, you know, pop culture paganism or pop culture witchcraft is not all deity work and deity worship. That's not all of it. Another way I kind of incorporate this a little bit into my practice is by using verbiage from media or books, songs that I particularly like. I'm a firm believer in leaving things to the professionals, and oftentimes authors can summarize like emotions or thoughts or feelings way better than I can. So occasionally, I think one of my most notable examples is one of my wards is literally uses a sigil that is made out of the sentence, "You shall not pass," which like is a Gandalf quote from Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? So I love the emotion behind that. I love the power and the energy behind that like kind of like, you will not cross this like effing line or I will literally kill you. Like that was very much, I appreciated that. And I got that energy like in that scene of that book, or in the movie, especially when he was like, you know, I loved that, and I really connected with that, and I really wanted to like channel that into my own practice and turn that into a house ward, so I did. There are definitely ways to incorporate some of your favorite pieces of media into your spirituality if you so choose, but I think we see this most prominently, or this idea of pop culture paganism, pop culture witchcraft, manifesting the most in kind of like deity work practices, so that's kind of why I mentioned that as well. So that's just kind of my little spiel on pop culture witchcraft. It was like actually very fun to talk about, and I would love to hear about some of the creative ways you use it in your practice. So without further ado, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.